Tonight, we'll dive into one of the most unsettling legends in Taiwan's modern history. It all began with a farmer's wife who had been sick for years. Eventually, her body gave in, and her family watched as she drew her last breath. They wept, held awake, and guarded her lifeless body for 3 full days and nights. Everyone thought the story had ended there. But on the 4th night, something impossible happened. The woman suddenly opened her eyes. She sat upright in bed, her gaze sharp and alive, and began to speak. The voice that came out was not her own. It was unfamiliar, almost chilling, as if another soul had taken her place. This moment marked the beginning of an incredible mystery. The news spread quickly, shocking villages, towns, and eventually the entire island. The case became so famous that even government leaders ordered it to be investigated. The story takes us back to 1959, on the remote coast of Haifeng Island in Yunlin. Wu, a hard-working farmer, was busy with a risky construction project that drained all his time and energy. At home, his wife Lin lay in bed, weak and frail, relying on medicine just to survive. Their life together had always been simple and traditional. Wu worked outside, Lin stayed home to care for the household. But when the construction on the island began, strange things started to happen. Lin's health, which had always been fragile, took a sudden turn for the worse. Every time Wu returned home on Sundays to see her, he felt dizzy and drained, as though some unseen presence was weighing on him. And oddly, once he left the house, Lin's condition would improve. Then came the whispers. Neighbors claimed they often saw Wu riding his bicycle with a young woman sitting on the back, or spotted him walking side by side with a girl far too young to be his wife. Some swore they even saw him bring the mysterious woman home. But Wu had no memory of any of this. He was an honest, hard-working man, not someone to risk his marriage with an affair. The rumors didn't make sense, and yet, the unease in the family home kept growing. It was as though an invisible shadow had settled over their lives. No one knew then that these were just the first signs of something far more terrifying. In the end, Lin's fragile body could no longer hold on. She passed away in her bed, her husband Wu standing helplessly at her side as tears filled the room. Relatives and neighbors mourned loudly, and for 3 days and nights her body was kept in the house as the family prepared for the funeral. But in the stillness of the 4th night, something unthinkable happened. The body that had lain cold and motionless suddenly stirred. Lin sat up on the bed, her eyes wide open and full of life. Everyone froze in terror. Then she began to speak, but the voice that came out was not hers. It was sharper, stronger, completely unfamiliar. She turned toward Wu, her expression calm yet firm, and declared, "I am not Lin. My name is Zhu. I am 18 years old." The family was struck with horror. At first, they believed she had simply gone mad, her mind burned by fever. But soon, her behavior began to prove otherwise. The woman who once could barely leave her bed now moved around the house with strength, even joining Wu in the fields. The illiterate wife who had never held a pen suddenly began to write with clear, elegant handwriting. She started keeping the family's accounts, showing a natural talent for bookkeeping, and even advising Wu on his construction work, turning projects that had always lost money into profitable ones. To those who lived with her, it became impossible to deny. This was no longer the same woman they once knew. Lin was gone, and in her place, another soul had taken over. But who was this soul that now lived in Lin's body? The voice called herself Zhu, an 18-year-old girl. She claimed she had grown up in a modest family in Kinmen. Her father worked as a cook at the county police station, while her mother ran a small food stall to support the household. Life was simple, but Zhu had been devout since her teenage years, eating vegetarian meals and praying daily. That quiet life ended abruptly in 1958, during the violent artillery battles that swept Kinmen. To escape the shelling, Zhu's parents joined other villagers in hiring a boat, hoping to flee to safety. But once at sea, disaster struck. Strong winds pushed their small craft adrift for days. Their food ran out, and one by one, passengers starved to death. Zhu herself eventually collapsed, unconscious from hunger and exhaustion. After more than 2 weeks adrift, the boat washed up near the coast of Taiwan. Local fishermen found Zhu and revived her with water. She awoke to see herself surrounded by strangers, 7 men staring down at her. Everyone else on the boat was dead. She was the sole survivor. At first, Zhu believed she had been saved. One fisherman even spoke kindly, offering to take her in. But then the men discovered valuables hidden on the wrecked boat, gold and jewelry that had belonged to the dead. Their kindness turned to greed. They began to whisper among themselves. Zhu was the only witness left alive. If she went to the authorities, they could all be punished. The decision was made. Despite her pleading, despite her promise to give up everything she owned, the men dragged her to the water's edge. Moments later, they pushed her into the sea and watched as she drowned. Her life had ended at 18, but her story did not. Zhu's spirit, restless and filled with injustice, drifted across the waves. She cried out to the heavens, and one day, she said, she was heard. A deity pitied her, recognizing that her life should not have ended so cruelly. The spirit was taken in and placed under the care of the bodhisattva of the underworld. Through the body of Lin, she was given another chance to live in the world of the living. After Zhu revealed her past, the story quickly spread beyond Wu's village. People were stunned not only by her words, but by the accuracy of the details she gave. She spoke of her parents in Kinmen, names that could be traced and verified. She described streets, temples, and customs that matched the real place perfectly, down to small details no outsider could possibly know. Some skeptical Kinmen natives even traveled to meet her, only to leave shaken by how precisely she described their homeland. Soon, doctors and scholars began to take interest. In 1962, the director of the Army's 55th Hospital, Dr. Liu, personally examined her. He observed her closely and concluded she was clear-minded, logical, and emotionally stable. Nothing in her behavior matched the symptoms of a psychiatric disorder. But society remained divided. On one side were those who dismissed the entire case as mental illness. They argued that Lin, weakened by years of sickness, had suffered a psychological break, splitting into another personality. They pointed out that cases of sudden changes in voice, memory, and behavior were known in medical history. On the other side were those who firmly believed this was something far beyond science. They asked, how could a woman who never once left her village know so much about Kinmen's life and people? How could she speak with such accuracy about real events that had happened there? The debate grew louder, and newspapers covered the story relentlessly. It became one of the most talked about mysteries of its time. The sensation even reached the highest levels of government, so much so that leaders themselves ordered investigations. The question remained, was this a case of illness or undeniable proof of a soul reborn in another body? As the years passed, Zhu's name became known across Taiwan and beyond. Yet instead of chasing fame, she chose to live a quiet, disciplined life. She became fully vegetarian, refusing meat of any kind. When people came to her for guidance, she did not use rituals or spirit writing. Instead, she simply looked at them and somehow could tell their fortunes or explain their troubles. Word spread quickly. People said she had been sent by the gods, a messenger on earth. They began to call her the vegetarian lady, and many treated her with deep reverence. Stories of her abilities multiplied. One tale tells of a young man who passed by. Zhu stopped him and warned that misfortune loomed over him. She handed him a banana, telling him it would protect his life. The man laughed it off, dismissing it as superstition. That very same day, he was struck in a fatal accident. For many, this was proof that Zhu's powers were real. By 1971, she had raised funds to build a temple called Jindong Temple. It became a place of worship and protection for countless believers. Then, in 1981, her story was adapted into a film titled Borrowed Corpse, Returning Soul. The movie caused a sensation, bringing her tale to an even wider audience. But it also angered her family, who felt the film twisted the truth with sensational details. They even sued the film company for defamation, creating a storm of controversy. Still, none of this could erase the legend. By then, Zhu was no longer just a woman who had borrowed another's body. She had become one of Taiwan's most famous spiritual figures, surrounded by faith, fear, and mystery. Over time, the debates and arguments surrounding Zhu began to fade. She herself withdrew from the public eye, living more quietly as the years went on. She kept her vegetarian vows, devoted herself to prayer, and stayed away from publicity. Then, in May 2018, Zhu passed away peacefully at the age of 97. Before her death, she spoke calmly and almost casually, saying only, "I'm leaving now." It felt as if she had long known her time was up. Her story spanned a lifetime, from an 18-year-old girl murdered at sea, to a spirit returning in another woman's body, to decades spent as a spiritual figure, worshipped and feared. For over 60 years, the tale of Zhu lived on, reshaped by every retelling. Even today, science continues to advance, offering new explanations for mental illness and personality change. Some believe her case was nothing more than a rare psychological condition. Others insist no medical theory can explain the precise details she revealed, or the life she lived after her return. So what was it? A medical mystery? Or undeniable proof that a soul can live on in another body? The truth has never been settled. But one thing is certain: the legend of Zhu remains one of the most haunting, unforgettable ghost stories in the Chinese-speaking world.